Crescent City Steakhouse, a true neighborhood restaurant operated by the Boykovich family since 1934. It is the oldest steakhouse in the city of New Orleans. Serving only hand-cut, prime-aged, corn-fed beef for over 80 years, Crescent City Steakhouse has become a dining destination for both die-hard locals and adventurous travelers who seek traditional, timeless New Orleans cuisine. Crescent City Steakhouse, 1001 North Broad, on the corner of St. Philip, in the heart of New Orleans.
Fall in love with autumn with PJ's new seasonal lattes. Our pumpkin latte brings you all the flavors of a pumpkin pie with hints of cinnamon and nutmeg, like your favorite holiday dessert in a cup. And our s'mores latte with flavors of toasted marshmallows, warm milk chocolate, and graham cracker cinnamon is sure to bring back campfire memories. The PJ's Fall Seasonal Lattes, available at your local PJ's only for a limited time.
So here's the bottom line. Well, it's funny that you say that. Let me tell you. Good evening, and welcome to a very special edition of Primetime Sports. Hey, I know I say this a lot. I'm your host, Scott Alexander, but I can't wait for this show tonight. And tonight, we have none other than Saints legend Archie Manning. Listen, this guy from Drew, Mississippi, where the population was only 2,400. Well, he's a true New Orleans and South Louisiana legend. I cannot wait to have Archie on the show. But we also, oh, by the way, one more thing about Archie. How about this? He was named the most popular athlete in the 20th century, in the 1900s. He got named that in 1992. He was also named Athlete of the Century in 1999 for the state of Mississippi. And he is a true, not just a legend, but just a great guy. You're going to see that today, obviously. Also, we have Alvin Gentry. He led the New Orleans Pelicans to their best year since 2008. They got to the second round of the playoffs against the defending champion Golden State Warriors. They swept the Blazers, and like I said, that's the best they've done since the CP3 era when they were in the conference semifinals against the San Antonio Spurs back in 2008. Hey, by the way, things look so bright for this team. AD and Drew are obviously signed up. We're going to see what's going to happen with Boogie Cousins. Hopefully he'll be back as well. The future has never been brighter for basketball in the city of New Orleans. And by the way, in case you didn't know, this team, since January the 10th till the end of the Blazers series, went 32-14. That was the third best mark in the NBA during that period, only behind Utah Jazz and the Golden State Warriors. Hey, by the way, also the NBA playoffs did start this past weekend. Last night, the NBA Conference Finals, I say the Conference Finals started. You had Houston and Golden State going at it. It was a fantastic first half. James Harden went off in the first half. He ended up with 41 points, the only player in NBA history to have 40-plus points in the first three game ones in the first three series. But it was all Golden State in the second half. They pulled away after a 56-56 tie. Kevin Durant went nuts, as he normally does, and they won that game 119-106. And the day before in Boston, how about this one? The Celtics, who were underdogs in the last two series they were in, they were absolutely crushing LeBron James and the Cavs the entire game. They ended up winning it by 25, 108-83. But that defense and that team play has been something fun to watch, and they'll be on again tonight, so check that on. They literally were up by 25 even in the first quarter in that game. Hey, by the way, Lsu Baseball, a little bit unfamiliar territory for the Tigers. Usually they're trying to figure out if they're going to be a one seed, and they're definitely hosting a regional. Not this year. They will probably not be hosting a regional unless something crazy happens and they win the SEC tournament and go undefeated from here on out. But they had to win 2 out of 3 last week, pretty much just to get into the tournament because they were playing bottom feeder Alabama, and they did it in grand fashion. That game Friday night, they were down 5-1 going into the 8th inning, and they ended up winning 7-5 on a grand slam by Bo Jordan. And this was a thing of beauty. And this, if LSU does go further and maybe does get in the tournament and does some damage, this play will always be remembered as the one that kept them in the tournament. So they have to pretty much win at least one game against Auburn this weekend, I think, to get in the tourney. That will give them a 15-15 record. If they win 2 out of 3, they'll be 16-14 in conference, and there's no team from the SEC that's never made it to the NCAA regionals with 16 wins in conference. So root for them this week, but they do only have a 3-13 record on the road, and that's what's been holding them back. So getting 2 in Auburn won't be easy. If they only win 1, they need to do some damage in the SEC tournament. Hey, this show is going to be great. I told you I can't wait. Usually have a longer open, but I want to save the time for my 2 guests. We have Archie Manning, of course, and Alvin Gentry. They're coming up next, and we're also going to do a segment with them together and have some fun. Hey, stay tuned. You're watching Primetime Sports.
Scotty says, for I watch my TV show. Scotty says, on Primetime Sports. Scotty says, for I watch my TV show. I got the Primetime Sports. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Welcome back to Primetime Sports. Hey, don't forget, we're going to have Alvin Gentry coming up next. Obviously, he took the Pels to places they haven't been in 10 years. But right now, if you're a kid of the 70s like I was, and you like sports, so there was 2 names. There was Pistol Pete Maravich, and of course, there was Archie Manning. And those are your 2 heroes as sports guys, and I certainly was no different from them. Archie, I didn't know his Ole Miss career because I was too young, but he was the SEC Player of the Year in 1969. He was the first-team All-American quarterback. He also was top 4 in the Heisman in both 69 and 70, despite a broken arm in 1970. Hey, with the Saints, you know, they had some porous teams back then, but Archie still shined. In 78, he was the NFC Most Valuable Player, the Player of the Year in that conference. Also a Pro Bowler for 2 years, and then he led that offense to 370 points. By the way, the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl in 1970, and they scored 371, and they were potent as well. Archie Manning, obviously, if you've seen the book of Manning, he puts family first, and to me, that's heartwarming. I just watched that again last night. It was phenomenal, and when his dad asked him, or he asked his dad what he should major in when he goes up to Ole Miss, his dad says, hey, whatever you're good at, but most importantly, I just want you to be a good guy, and that will stick with me forever. That's something I've always tried to teach my own kids, and I know many of you has done as well. And also, when people talk about him trying to bring his kids into the NFL, he was none of that. He said, I just wanted them to grow up to be good kids, and I wanted to raise a good family, and that's what he did. He just happened to have guys that were his sons who were Super Bowl champions, Super Bowl MVPs, and great family as well with his wife Olivia and obviously his oldest son Cooper as well. Everybody knows Peyton and Eli, but Cooper was just a good athlete and maybe even a better athlete than all of them. But here he is for the first time on our show. Finally, I get the 4th Ring of Honor member. We've had Ricky Jackson, we've had Morton Anderson, and of course we've had Willie Rove. And here he is, Archibald Manning. Elisha, Archibald Manning III. How you doing, my friend?
Good, Scott. Glad to be with you, pal.
And I didn't bring this up in the beginning, but I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, we were in North Carolina, and I introduced you to the Hickory Club right there. It was the Hickory Sportsman Club, and you were the guest speaker, and you showed up a little bit after, and there you are right there kind of smiling. But I said something about... I think I made a joke of some sort about, hey, Archie didn't even recognize me because I used to work games with you with Tim Brando about a decade before. But as you can see there, I'm looking kind of portly. I gained 40 pounds when I moved back to New Orleans, literally in 3 years. And you said, Scott, when you got to the podium, you said, Scott, let's be honest. You say it's 30 or 40, but it's more like 60 or 70. So you put me back in my place.
Oh, you're doing good now.
So anyway, but how you been, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing real good. I've just had a little work done the last few years. It happens at my age, and a couple of health issues. I'm fighting through it, and I'm doing fine.
Well, you're a guy that was sacked 400 times. Are you still feeling that right now?
Well, I don't know. I never thought too much about that, and there's a factor. You know, if you play football a long time, everyone's going to have some effects later on. I was doing pretty good. I was always pretty concerned about what I'd do post-football. If I wanted to keep working out and try to stay away from, gaining a lot of weight or still maintaining your health. And maybe I got a little cocky with it because I was doing pretty good till about 5 years ago, and then just all of a sudden it happens. Everybody has a little back trouble, and I had some fusions, a couple of knee replacements, and this and that, and rotator, and it just seemed like it kept coming. But I hope I've got it behind me. That's my goal this year, is not to have any more operations and stay healthy.
Well, you look fantastic. You really do. And by the way, this book on the set right here, this Manning book that Archie and Peyton kind of co-wrote with a writer. One thing that always stuck to me when I read that book back in, I think, the early 2000s, Bill Walsh, to me, was one of the greatest coaches, I think, in NFL history. He had the dynasty with the 49ers, and he called you the best quarterback in the NFL back in 1980, and that's the season y'all went 1-15, right? Yeah. You were coming off those 2 fantastic years, but he also had a second-year quarterback named Joe Montana that he was starting. So when you hear stuff like that from somebody that's so credible, I mean, do you ever think, what if?
Well, you know, I don't really. I think a lot of people look back at my pro career because we didn't win many games and we kind of struggled here, that it was just constant misery, and it really wasn't. You know, one thing about it is I was one of these kids who wanted to grow up and play ball, so I feel like I was blessed. I got to live that dream. Now, I didn't see the brightest side of it, but a lot of players don't. And I got to do it for almost 15 years on the professional level. Loved college football, had a great experience there. I wouldn't swap that for anything, my days at Ole Miss. Same thing in high school, small rural town in Mississippi, small school, not many players, but you know, at the game of football, the only thing that really changes at each level, the players are bigger and stronger and faster, but the hearts are the same, and the same kind of men, same kind of guys you're playing with. So those memories are good, and I cherish the high school days, the college days, and even the pro days. So it's nice when people say nice things about you. I tried to play, tried to answer the bell, tried to be out there every Sunday for my team. We didn't know we would keep losing. You know, we changed coaches so many times. 7 coaches in your 11 years there. And so you think this is going to be the time, you know, and we're going to put something together. And in those days, I will say, I think it was harder to build. You know, the good teams stayed good longer because of the rules, because of the setup. Yeah. So it was hard to build, and we just never really quite had the right combination. But all in all, I enjoyed the journey. I really did. Well,
I say this frequently. I say, listen, I'm not a millennial, so I can't speak for how everybody feels about Drew Brees. He won a Super Bowl. Obviously, he's great. But when you talk about beloved Saints, I always put you at the top still, and I think anybody that's over 35 will put you the same way. I mean, I always throw Deuce McAllister. They love Deuce. They love Drew, obviously. But, Archie, you were a figure. So regardless of how the team's done, you were still beloved pretty much anywhere in the Deep South. I know that for sure.
Well, people have been very nice to me. As I said, my days at Ole Miss were, I growing up in this little small Mississippi town, Ole Miss had really good teams under Johnny Vaught in those days. So yes, I think I was like thousands of kids in Mississippi. I wanted to be an Ole Miss quarterback. And I still think, doing all the great things that have happened to me, and probably, some of the best times in sports that we've had is through our children. But yet, personally, the greatest thrill of my life when I was named the quarterback at Ole Miss, that I was going to be.
You were one of 8 coming in your recruiting class.
Yeah,
8.
Coach Vaught, I played for Johnny Vaught. He was a great coach. I was his last quarterback, and that was kind of his recruiting philosophy back then. He signed mostly Mississippi kids, but most of the teams. He would sign fullbacks and quarterbacks. He felt like those were the top athletes on the field, but he converted a lot of them. Sure. A lot of fullbacks wound up playing, it might be defensive ends, linebackers, quarterbacks playing defense, wide receiver, and so forth. So to get to go to Ole Miss was a thrill, get to play 3 years there, be the quarterback there. And then the relationships, the friendships that I made there, I still cherish those today.
Freshman didn't start back in that day, couldn't play. I mean, and then you started as a sophomore, which is your first year. That didn't happen under Coach Vaught. I know that.
I was the first one.
But the 1969 year, your second year, your junior year, I want to take you back to that because you had the first televised night game of all time. And you're playing against Alabama, powerful Bear Bryant, who, by the way, called you the greatest quarterback athlete he's ever seen. Archie, you're a two-way player, did some incredible things on the ground and with your arm. But that game was a 33-32 loss. You had a record that stood for 4 decades, as you know, 434 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 436, and 104 rushing. And Bear Bryant was like, I can't believe we won this game. And talk about that game, and then it propelled you to beat all these other undefeated teams, the Georgias, the LSUs, and the Tennessees down the line.
There's so many things that come up that make you feel your years when somebody says that was the first nationally televised primetime night game.
Primetime at night, yeah.
But they just didn't, there wasn't much, it wasn't so much football on TV in those days. As a matter of fact, to have a Saturday afternoon game was kind of a big deal. You didn't do that, but maybe 2 times a year, 3 times a year, if you were a good team. And then you play in a bowl game, but there weren't that many bowl games back then. So that was a big deal to be playing. We anticipated that game. It was the 3rd game of the year. It's going to be over in Birmingham, in a great stadium, Legion Field. Of course, Bear Bryant was already a Hall of Fame type coach, and great teams had won national championships. So it was going to stack up as a really big game. I think what was kind of unusual about it, Scott, offensive football in those days wasn't like it is today. Still, Eli used to kid.
Right.
Eli kidded me about it. He said, "Dad, one time, he was looking at my numbers.
Right,
he said they weren't very good."
Right.
And I said, "Eli, in those days, if a quarterback threw for 180 yards, and maybe I ran for another 40, that was a big day. That was a big day. So that game to have."
That's
me
crazy.
to have all that kind of yardage, and Scott Hunter was the other quarterback, and Scott had a great night.
Yes.
Threw for a lot of yards. So that was really a kind of a freak game. We had lost a 1-point game the week before to Kentucky, so we kind of let it hang. We just let it go, and maybe that wasn't Coach Bryant's best defense that year. Went up and down the field. It was a tough game to lose, but I guess it was kind of the game that put me on the map.
I tell millennials all the time this, is you can't look at numbers and just pretend you were in that era and understand what this was about. And I'm talking about the Saints particularly, because your numbers are still great, 24,000 yards. You were the 3rd leading rusher of all time for a quarterback at the time you retired. Only 2 had more. So, but they want to compare it to like these average quarterbacks that played in the early 2000s when they were passing every down. Right. I said, you can't do that. It's not. And when you look back, I said Archie Manning was the guy. In this city, he's revered as not just a player, but as the person he was in the public. Your Royal Olds commercials. That's my first memory of you is your commercials. So when you look back to that era with the Saints, what's the first thing that comes up?
Well, it was neat being the quarterback of the Saints. This is New Orleans, as we know, is a great town. We've lived here throughout. We've been here 47 years now. We've made our home here, raised our kids here. They love their football. And even though we weren't very good, people loved the Saints, supported the Saints. We were in the start a couple of years ago, we had the 50th anniversary. Well, I wasn't here, and it started in '67, but I came in '71. So I've been here through most of that time. So I know about Saints fans. I know about the passion here in this area in South Louisiana for football. So I appreciate it, but it was a small town, and to be the quarterback. We didn't have the Pelicans in those days. We didn't have the Jazz yet.
Right.
So it was a one professional sport town. Of course, everybody loved LSU. Tulane football was pretty good, but still, it was a unique position to be the quarterback of the NFL team here in New Orleans. So things that came with it were, community involvement, but you meet a lot of people, meet a lot of nice people. You get involved with a lot of different types of projects and events, and it was good. It was fun. I still was very involved in my home state of Mississippi because I wasn't very far away. We still had family there. I kind of had the best of that. But the one thing about playing for the Saints, you met a lot of teammates. A lot of teammates came through here. A lot of coaches came through. You meet a lot of people.
I'm going to say something because it just made me think of it. I talked to Burt Jones recently. In 1976, he was the NFL MVP, former LSU star. But y'all are all kind of the same. Terry Bradshaw, Burt Jones, Louisiana guys that went on, did some nice things in the NFL. You're from Mississippi, right across the border, basically. Burt said this. He said, hey, Terry Bradshaw had this defense that was phenomenal, and he had great players around him, and he won 4 Super Bowls. I was an MVP, but I had a great team with the Colts. He said Archie Manning, without doubt, not just one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league. This is the year you were hurt, by the way, 76. He said he's one of the 2 or 3 best players in the NFL. And he said it back then. I asked him if that quote still stood, and he said absolutely. When you hear these words.
Well, I appreciate those kind of comments. Like I said, I enjoyed having the opportunity to play the game. A lot of people look back on it like it was just a miserable time because we didn't win a whole lot of football games. But we were competing. One thing I always said, every Sunday when we teed it up, the score was 0-0, and we had a chance. And we would pull some upsets. We weren't favored very often. We'd pull some upsets. We got close a couple of times, didn't quite tip it over. So I really have a lot of admiration for a lot of people that I played against. I always studied the quarterback position very closely. I grew up really admiring quarterbacks. When I came in the league, the guys that were the great player, Johnny Unitas was still in the league, and Bart Starr was still in the league.
Yes. Fran
Tarkin and Sonny Jurgensen. These guys are great Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And then the people that I was in the league with all those years, like with Burt, I'm a little older than Burt, but Burt, Terry Bradshaw was 1 year behind him. And I think about Roman Gable, John Brody,
so many good
Jimmy
ones.
Hart, a lot of guys that this generation doesn't know. And the rules are better for quarterbacks these days to have those big yardage, 5,000 yard seasons and 40 and 50 touchdowns and everything. The rules weren't like that back then, but it was some mighty good quarterbacks back in that era.
I'm going to do two things. 78, 79, I want to take you there real quick. I don't have a ton of time. We're going to have you again with Alvin coming up.
Yeah.
But those years were great. I mean, 7 and 9. You were the MVP. First time that's happened, an MVP in the NFC on a losing team. So obviously you had the respect at that point. That's 78. 79, that team went 8-8, and everybody remembers, like, I don't know which particular year, 78, 79, the two Falcons losses that were just the interference call in Atlanta, Grover Clemmer. I still remember his name. So this is 40 years ago. It still sticks in my craw. So I want to know the players. And then the Big Ben that happened in New Orleans before that. The first Hail Mary that anybody can really remember, certainly down here. You were so close to 10-6, and
Yeah, we were competing. That was the thing about it. We got where we were competitive. We were. Dick Nolan was our coach. Dick was still trying to build a defense. He'd been a big part of the Dallas flex defense, and then he went to San Francisco as the head coach. Had some really good teams. They came close with the 49ers. They had a great flex defense. So when he came here, Hank Stram had been here, and Hank had really put together some good offensive players here. And he had drafted Chuck Muncie, Tony Gall was a great fullback, Henry Childs, very productive.
Wes Chandler.
My wide receivers were Wes Chandler and Ike Harris.
They were phenomenal.
Really good players. And so we were able to move the ball and score some points, but it was trying to build that defense. It didn't quite come together, unfortunately, at the same time.
And everybody but Ike Harris was a Pro Bowler that I think it was the 1979 season. I could be mistaken, 78. But point being is, that was a fun team to watch. And by the way, your children, a lot of people, remember the Super Bowls, but people forget this. This is what I think is kind of phenomenal. All three of you, meaning the two quarterbacks, obviously Cooper had the spinal issue, so he couldn't continue his career as a wide receiver at Ole Miss. Great athlete, though. But all three of you were SEC Players of the Year for your schools at Ole Miss and Tennessee for Peyton. And you were all drafted. You were the second pick of the draft, probably for not your broken arm, with Jim Plunkett being picked ahead. You might have gone first, and who knows what happened in your career there. But you had both the other two were first picks of the draft. That just does not happen in one family.
Well, we kind of pinch ourselves at that. When I came along, I felt like I was very fortunate to be drafted. The draft was so different back then.
Yeah.
It was early. You didn't have all the combine. Before that draft, I didn't talk to anybody, didn't run for anybody, didn't throw for anybody. They just watched film and they draft. So I felt fortunate to be an early pick. I was the second pick. I was really glad the Saints picked me rather than New England and Houston. I mean, none of the three were very good, or they wouldn't have been picking right there.
Home,
so,
right?
but still to come here and try to start something. So I was honored, and then for both the boys to be the number one pick in the draft, that was, like I said, we kind of pinch ourselves on that.
Well, we're going to get more into that because I'm going to have you right back. I'm going to have Alvin Gentry, and I want to talk more about your kids. And I know you love basketball. You were a basketball player. You were a track star. And people don't know this. He was drafted by four major league teams, three teams, 4 times in the majors. We'll get into a little bit of that when we come back. But here's a tradition we have, besides giving you a couple of gift certificates. This is Shays de la Shays on Maple Street, not far from your old Tulane Stadium, right between Carrollton and Broadway. Phenomenal. And this is Katie's Restaurant, and I know you'll love this one. This is on Iberville, Uptown, Iberville, whichever way you pronounce it. So we're going to have you back. Also, we have a tradition. You got Ricky Jackson on these balls. You got Bobby Abear. You got Morton. You got them all. Pat Swilling's been here. And we just bought a brand new ball because they're getting kind of filled. So, Archie Manning, you'll be the first one on this ball right here.
Great. Yeah.
And like I said, we're going to have him come back for a quick segment at the end. But next, we're going to have Alvin Gentry, the head coach for the New Orleans Pelicans. And this team went further than any team has since 2008. And honestly, this was the second best, pretty much overall team, but this team has the highest ceiling, so good things are coming in the future. Alvin Gentry next, but stay tuned. Archie and Alvin are going to be together for the last segment right here on Primetime Sports.
The owners of the Delachaise Wine Bar on St. Charles Avenue have opened up their newest creation uptown on Maple Street called Chez Delachaise, a new local wine bistro featuring a larger menu of small and large plates, a brighter atmosphere, and full table service. Additionally, patrons can enjoy a large patio out front as well as an extensive wine list offering selections from around the world. It's Chez Delachaise, 7708 Maple Street between Carrollton and Broadway.
Rock and roll will never die. It's old New Orleans, my oh my. Come on, baby, let's go rock and roll at the city lane. All night, let's roll, let's rock and roll. Baby, do the rock and roll. At Mid-City Lane's the home of rock and roll.
Cayman is an all-natural alligator oil that treats anything concerning your skin from head to toe. Cayman oil is antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, and helps with ailments, including burns, severe acne, athlete's foot and toe fungus. Cayman oil also helps with everyday issues such as healing cuts and scrapes, as well as spider and mosquito bites. It also does wonders quickly clearing up scars, dry scalp, psoriasis, and eczema. And it's made right here in Louisiana. More information is available online at CaymanOil.com or Amazon.com. Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports, and what a treat that was with Archie Manning, truly one of my childhood heroes. But you know what? Basketball is my first love, and I couldn't wait for my next guest to come back because he came before the season started, and he is Pelicans head coach Alvin Gentry. I said this in the open, that 32-14 record from January the 10th till when they finished the Blazers series was the third best in the NBA during that stretch. And that's when you saw them playing that Golden State type of basketball, the free-flowing, getting space, hitting the open shots. And that's the kind of coach Alvin Gentry is. He did it for years with Phoenix, and he's been doing that his entire career. But here he is again, right here on our show. And welcome back. And, man,
it's good to be back.
How good was that season? I mean, I have to ask you, that run through the second half of the season had to be fun to watch for you.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And, obviously we had to reinvent ourselves a little bit when DeMarcus went down with the injury. But it took us a few games, but then I think our guys really adjusted to what we were trying to do. I thought from that point on, Anthony Davis could have easily been the MVP of the league. Drew Holiday had a career year. All the other guys stepped up, guys like Ian Clark and Etwan Moore, and then obviously adding Nico to our team really made a difference. So it was a fun year.
The beardless Nico, because I'm going to say this. Let me say this, because y'all's faith in Drew, let me start there, was warranted. And, I think a lot of fans are questioning it because he had so many injuries when he came over, and they didn't feel they got their money's worth on the first deal. But I remember I had Dell Demps on this show in June of last summer, and he made it clear, unequivocally, that they needed to get Drew Holiday back, and that was going to be one of the catalysts for the team's success. And my goodness, did he ever deliver? He
did deliver, and I thought he just had such a great year. And I will argue this and continue to argue it on your show, Scott. That if he's not on the first team all defense, then I think there's something wrong with this league. And to me, right now, with Kawhi out, he's as good a two-way player as there is in the NBA.
Agreed. Agreed, because the guy was getting it done on offense during the playoffs, averaging 24 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. He's just become an all-around player. But getting the guy to space the defense when Nico right when he shaved that beard, they went on the 5-game win streak. By the way, I'm on record on Twitter and Facebook saying after your 4-game losing streak, you're going to win 5 in a row. I didn't expect the sweep against Blazers, but I said they're going to win 5 in a row. And people are like, they're playing Golden State and San Antonio. You're out of your mind. And y'all made me look good.
Yeah.
But Nico was a big catalyst for that.
He was, and to be honest with you, Dale did a good job of pulling that off and getting him on the team. And I thought that he was a good player. Didn't realize he was as good a player as he was from the standpoint of rebounding, spacing. There was a sense of toughness about him that I didn't really know if he had or not. But our guys love having him on the team. He loves being here, and he was an integral part of us being able to make that run at the end.
Yeah, he's not going to mistake anybody for the defense of a Michael Cooper, Bruce Bowen, or even Kawhi Leonard. But his defense was surprising to me as well because he knows how to use his body and get in positions that are going to disrupt the defender.
Very much so, and we had him guard, 4s, 5s, sometimes 3 men. But I thought he did a good job. He's a really smart player. Like you said, he's a guy that knows angles and positions. So although he doesn't, he's not Charles Atlas, but
sure.
I tell you, he's a lot stronger than you think he is.
Before I get into the rest of the players, obviously AD is the catalyst of this team. I have to ask you, now that you've been in New Orleans, I guess it's coming up on 2 years, or 3 years, I should say.
Yeah.
What is your take of the city? I know you've ingratiated yourself in. I know you love it, but give me your take of New Orleans after 3 years.
Well, I think it's the most unique city in the United States first. I think the people here have a passion, and, when we were struggling, they let you know it.
Oh, sure.
But, when you're doing well, they're the first to tell you. So I like it because I think that, they are involved and they're committed and they love their teams here. And when you do well, they'll be the first ones to be on board. And I like that about New Orleans. Obviously, the food is the best in the world. I mean, you can walk in any place here and get you a great meal. And I still think that's what's really unique about it. But the people here, you're either New Orleans or you're not.
Yeah.
And if you're not, we have nothing to do with you here.
Well,
okay.
Well, if you start winning, they do. Hey, by the way, speaking of that food thing, I think the last time you were on in September, we both talked about, boy, it's tough to. I'm finally on the way back down.
Yeah,
I gained 40, and I'm finally on the way back down, Alvin. I've lost about half, but I'm trying to get all the way. So I know about that part.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got to also say one thing. There was a game I went to in January that really, I think, turned the season around. And I even said that game, if this game, the way they play, doesn't turn around, nothing will. Because the Pelicans were good. I mean, they were just languishing around 500. They were trying to get over Rondo's injury and ingratiating the new players into the offense, including Boogie, who only had a few games last season. But it was the Chicago Bulls game. And the Pelicans were down by 18 in this game with 8 minutes to go. And our previous guest, who you're going to be with again in a little bit, Archie Manning, was there with Tim Floyd. And they left the game. I'll never forget because I was right where they were leaving. They wanted to beat traffic, whatever the reason. But they were down 18 with 8 minutes to go. It was 17 with 5 minutes to go. And I'm sitting literally directly behind the Bulls bench. I could hear them talking. And the passion that I saw from everybody on the team, I mean, and Boogie in particular, he had that monster game, 44 points, 24 rebounds, 10 assists, and all this stuff there, 4 steals. But the thing is, the passion, and they had the will to win, and they weren't going to give up. And to me, the way they played was the first I'd seen it with that much, I have to win the game kind of passion.
Excuse me. I think you're exactly right. And
was that the game you were thinking of?
I was going to say that game right there. And,
all right.
You have to have a little luck. I don't know if you remember, but, Drew's brother is on the foul line with, 0.3 seconds to go.
He missed the free throw.
He missed the second free throw
Right.
that would have virtually won the game.
Right.
And when we got into an overtime situation, I think our guys were like, we've gotten a reprieve here, so we've got to go out and win this game. And I really do think that changed our season. It's funny that you would say that game, but that's exactly the game that I would point to because after that, I thought that there was a belief that the guys had in each other and in our team that we were going to be fine.
And just listen, I mean, Boogie was trying to get acclimated to this team going in. And I'm not saying he wasn't a great player. He had some great games and did some great things for this team. But I saw this in his face because when you're that close, you can just see. And he's getting everybody else involved. And I think he truly became a leader on this team, too. I mean, obviously, it's AD's team. I mean, you can say what you want about that. But he became a guy that I think the other guys were responding to. When Drew Holiday hit that shot, they were the first to congratulate each other. It was just big to me.
Yeah, it was big. And I think also that particular game made us believe in each other.
Right.
I mean, you know, I think sometimes guys try to do it on their own, but I thought there was a trust after that game that we had that we could do it collectively and not try to do it individually. And I thought that was another reason that we started to play much better basketball.
You see AD and Boogie right there. I mean, you know, Boogie, when he got hurt, obviously in that game against Houston Rockets, the Pels had won 7 out of 8 games. People kind of forget. They look at the 10-game streak and they look at the 9-game streak, the 2 streaks they had, which are, by the way, congratulations, 2 longest streaks in franchise history, and they were just a month apart. So, but the fact is that they were still playing pretty well when Boogie went down, and people starting to forget that. Like, would they be better without him?
Yeah, well, you know, that's always the question, you know. Or, you know, they're talking about Boston without, you know,
right. Kyrie
Irving. And I doubt if Boston, that's not a coach on the team, would say, yeah, we're better. Obviously, when you got a guy averaging 26 points and 13 rebounds, and he's playing alongside
historic numbers, by the way.
Yeah, by the way,
5 assists.
Yeah, and the guys, the last 2 guys that have averaged those numbers were MVP in the league.
Right.
You know, so I just think that you know, fans are fans, and you know, they're a little fickle sometimes. But you know, obviously, when we had those 2 guys out there, we were always going to have a mismatch somewhere.
I don't know if you can play your hand, or can you? Will Boogie be back on this team?
We want him back. You know, we want him back, and obviously there's a lot of things that happen in free agency, but, you know, I'll be the first to say it, and I think Dale would follow that up, and Mickey and anybody else here would say that, yes, we would like to have him back on our team.
So when Boogie's watching the games, whether he's at them or watching during his rehab, what do you think's going through his head seeing the success of the Pelicans?
Well, I don't – I feel bad for him because he was an integral part of this getting started.
Sure.
It was going to be the first time that he was in a playoff situation. I think he was looking so forward to it. Just unfortunate that an injury like that happened. It was just such a freak injury, you know, less than 15 seconds to go in the game, you know, shooting a free throw, and it was just one of those things that was a perfect storm. He ends up, you know,
crazy play.
Yeah, just a crazy play. But
what if he makes the free throw? We're not having this discussion, right?
We wouldn't be having this discussion
because he went for the rebound.
Yeah, but I just think that you know, we were gelling at that time, like you said. I think people forget that we'd won 7 out of 8 games.
Yeah, 4 in a row.
Yeah, and 4 in a row, and obviously beating Houston was the highlight of the year because at that time they were playing such great basketball and, you know, been on a 17-game win streak, and there was a lot of things that had happened, and we just felt like we were coming into our own and felt like we could play against any team in the league.
There's no question that the big fella, Anthony Davis, stepped up in a huge way, averaged well into the 30s after the injury. He felt he had to take over, and this, I think, for the fans, this was the Anthony Davis that they've been waiting for. He's been a fantastic player, an all-star pretty much his entire career, but he literally elevated without question his name and his game as one of the greatest in the NBA today.
Yeah, he did, and I think what was interesting is that when Cuz went down, one of the things that he talked about, he said, I'm gonna have to be Russell Westbrook, and we thought, hey, we'll take that, you know, and he did begin to play that way from a scoring, rebounding, defensive standpoint. We just thought that he was so solid in everything that he did, and there was just a passion that he had taken to a whole nother level. And every night he was doing this, and every night he was getting double teamed and triple teamed. He's not a player that ever gets to play one-on-one with very many people, and when he does, he dominates that position.
All right, I want to talk about the sweep of Portland because, listen, most of the games were really good. 3 of them I can remember were like, you know, first game the Pelicans had the big lead. They came back and tied it, I believe, and then the Pelicans went ahead, and then the Pelicans ended up winning the game. But what's it like as a coach going through this? Because I know everybody talks about how Golden State swept the Pelicans the last time they were in the playoffs, but 3 of those games were tight too. So I always kind of defend that. It's like, hey, you're playing the champions. But my point is this. As a coach going through game by game, and they were the higher seed, they were a 2-1 favorite. Not that any of that matters, but, you know, for the national perspective, everybody picked Portland. Most people in New Orleans picked the Pels, maybe because we love the home team. But the fact is, I want to know your coach's perspective as the game's going on.
Well, first of all, they asked 23 media people, and 23 media people said
we put that on the show.
That Portland would win. Right. I think as far as our guys were concerned, our deal was that, you know, we're starting on the road, which we did not it didn't matter to us. Actually, our road record was as good as our home record, and I think we had the 4th or 5th best road record in the NBA. So we felt like, hey, we got an opportunity to play and win one on the road, and if we do, then all of a sudden we have a home court advantage. And we lost a big lead. Our guys hung in there, found a way to win, and then the very first thing that Rondo said in the locker room was like, hey guys, we can't be satisfied with this. Hey, we got to get the one 2 days from now. And I thought that was going to be key. That was a key thing. It wasn't like, hey, we split and now we're good. It was like, hey, let's win the second one. And I thought our guys went out and did a great job in that game of finding a way to win also.
I'm so glad you brought up Rondo, because I've been preaching the virtues of Rajon Rondo all season. When it wasn't looking like it was a great find early, and I kept saying, just give this thing time. And I wasn't talking about playoff Rondo. I was just talking about the leadership he provides and the things that he tells. If you're sitting close, you can hear the things he's telling the other players. He's chattering the whole game. And it's unbelievable how people respond to him on this team.
Incredible. You're right. And the coaches as well. I think the one thing that we understand about him is that, he is a student of the game and he works at it. Like I said to someone just not a few days ago, he takes every practice and put it on his computer. He takes every game and put it on his computer. And if you ask him a question about the most minute thing that happened in the game, he'll tell you. And to me, he always comes in with, a suggestion. Have we ever thought about this? Or I was looking at the game and maybe, on this play we can do this. And so we listen as a coaching staff because, sometime with a player out on the floor, he's more familiar with the feel of the game and the angles and what's going on. So I think he's going to be, I think he's going to be a great head coach in this league if that's the path he chooses to take.
Coach, this isn't like the NFL where, you couple guys get hurt, you start 22 guys, and if you count the kicker and punter, you got 24 guys out there. My point is, there's only 5. So when you have injuries, it affects you. When you have epic injuries like the Pelicans did your first year, where they had the most in NBA history, I believe it was a total of 351 games or something like that, games missed by starters. It's like, fathom that. And people like, oh, he's not doing this or this. What goes through your head? Because you yourself can't really be the guy doing it, but I'm sitting here, people like me that really understand the game are. Do you feel any vindication from what happened back then to where you are now, which is only 2 years later, and now you're in the second round of the playoffs against the defending champions?
I think, first of all, you got to understand the mentality of fans. And, if you're going to be in this business, you have to understand that. All you got to do is look at just what happened the other day. There's a coach that got Coach of the Year that won 59 games that was fired.
It's crazy.
So we're in a very volatile business from a fan standpoint as well as management standpoint. So I think what you got to do is you got to believe in yourself. You got to have the confidence to know that, hey, I've done this and this has worked. You got to try to get past the injuries and not use that as an excuse. But I knew eventually that we would get this thing headed in the right direction. We had too many good players, and our whole thing was that if we could just get them healthy enough, we would be fine. And you can see that AD stepped up, Drew stepped up. The guys that we signed, I thought Dell did a great job bringing in Etwan Moore and Ian Clark and guys like that. And, obviously the Nico thing was really big for us with Dell making that trade. So we had a team that we liked coaching and that was that could play a system that we felt like was going to be very successful with a healthy team. And I think you could see that the results showed.
Well, Coach, as much as this city embraced the CP3 team with David West and Tyson Chandler and Peja, I think this team, the future is so much brighter, and you're a part of that, and we want to thank you, man.
I love being here, and I hope I'm here a long time, but I think our team is going to continue to get better. And I do have to throw this in before we go that I think you're going to see the leadership of this team take a whole different level from the standpoint of what Mrs. Benson has been to us and how she's been so supportive and what she's done. That our guys really appreciate her presence. And she was there for every game, every practice, and she even ate lunch with us every day on the road. And it's something that I think as a coaching staff and as players you really appreciate.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, I can't thank you enough.
Right, sure.
Appreciate you. You're going to stick around because we have a segment with you and Archie, but I'm going to give you these now. There's 2 gift certificates, one to Shays Delachey's on Maple Street.
Love it.
Phenomenal. And this is another one, Katie's, which is in the Mid-City area, and Katie's is phenomenal.
Okay.
I'm telling you, that is on Iberville, whatever you want to pronounce it, and right there, right off Canal. So check them out.
Appreciate it. We'll do it.
He's going to stick around because we're going to have Archie back on the set, and we're going to have them both together, and we're going to have him sign the ball after the Archie segment. But we'll be right back here on Primetime Sports. Stay tuned. This is going to be a fun one. Welcome back to Primetime Sports. Hey, I told you we had Archie in the first segment. We had Alvin in the second. We just put them together. And Alvin even wanted to make Archie feel a little more comfortable. So he went into the car and got his Pelicans golf shirt on. But welcome back, guys. How you doing?
I thought we were playing golf.
Exactly. I said I got the free passes, but they're for a restaurant, not the golf course. By the way, in your segment just now, I talked about that game that I thought turned the season around. And it also happened to be that game that I saw Archie and Tim Floyd, the great coach from UNO and Iowa State and the Bulls, leave the game early. So, Archie, here's your chance to explain. What happened in that game?
Well, I may excuse you. You know, I always prided myself in really a lot of sporting events I've been to in not leaving. And people do. I get it.
Yeah.
And believe me, I could sure understand in my career, I know a bunch of people left early. I think my wife and kids were leaving early. But Tim had another friend with him from up around Hattiesburg.
Right, yeah.
Now, we were down. How much? I mean,
it was 18 with 8 minutes, and then it was 17.
What was funny to go to that game with Tim. Tim said he wanted to go see the two teams that had fired him.
Right.
Yeah, I was Tim's assistant.
Right. But it wasn't looking good. And so he said, "You think we might beat the traffic, get out of here? We got to get to Hattiesburg." I said, "Yeah, come on, let's go." And so I got home, and on the radio I called. I said, because Tim did say, you know, an NBA game doesn't start to the last 4 minutes. And that's true.
And
he knows it better than anyone. But I was guilty as charged. We left early.
Last 5 minutes in particular, and the 10 minutes of two overtimes was phenomenal. By the way, but people probably don't know this, that you have a big man crush on his son, and I want to hear that. Peyton Manning is your favorite NFL player. You love the NFL. Tell me where that came from.
By far, it goes all the way back. I just always admired him. Thought that his leadership was just like unapproachable, and just everything that he did was just such class. Even his great commercials. I love this commercial.
They're unbelievable. I know.
Yeah, I love this commercial.
Funny.
But I just and then obviously I spent a lot of time in Colorado, so the Broncos were my team, and then when they got him as their quarterback, I mean, it was like heaven sent. My kids. I mean, I got a kind of a shrine in there with a autographed picture that he signed for my birthday.
Cool. That's cool.
Footballs and a couple of jerseys and everything else. So I just think he's what it's all about.
When I moved back to New Orleans about 6 years ago, Archie, I was pleasantly surprised. I knew you had been a four-sport star in high school, but you went to a lot of Hornets and Pelicans games, and you're always there at the games. So you must love the sport.
I love to see them play, and I'm like everyone else in New Orleans, especially at the end of this year, so proud of what they did. Their run, they were so great. This is it's a great time of year in New Orleans every year when the weather kind of comes around a little bit, and all of a sudden the golf classic and the jazz fest and everything. But to mix it in with the Pelicans playing that kind of basketball and getting excited about the playoffs, it was truly a memorable time and a fun time for everyone. I was very, like so many, very proud of what they accomplished this year.
Yeah, and I was saying the same thing when y'all's were the cherry on top when y'all got to the second round. I'm like, does it get any better in New Orleans this time of year? The Jazz Fest, you have the Zurich Classic, you have the draft, the Saints pulled the first round heist, I think, and to get that guy. So when you're thinking about all the stuff going around, does any of this faze you?
No, I just think it's great being in New Orleans. Like I said, and the crowd that we had. We had probably played in the two, supposedly best arenas for crowds that were, in Portland and then at Golden State. And I tell you, I thought our crowd was every bit as good and even better because I thought the enthusiasm that they brought in that arena the nights that we were there just gave us that extra little push, and especially in the Golden State game, Game 3, I thought it was the best crowd of the year wherever we've been.
It was phenomenal to be there. Yeah. It was one of my favorite times in any NBA game, and I've been to many. Hey, I have to give my boy Tim Brando some props because I probably don't know you without Tim Brando, and I met you years ago. You've been in many booths with him. You've been in many studios with him. I've been in probably 2,000 different booths and studios over 25 years, but some of those were with you back in the early 2000s. I remember one time when Eli Manning, your son, second son that played in the NFL, was a rookie in preseason, and you had me, while I'm doing my work for Tim, you had me listening to the Giants preseason game and giving you updates on how Eli. I said, this is a devoted father.
I go way back with Tim Brando. A long time ago, of course, when I was playing, and he was a young radio guy in Baton Rouge who would come down and cover the Saints game. And it'd be one of those long days.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, he told me one time, there was another guy, a little reporter named Jimmy Smith. He was a great guy.
I remember Jimmy.
And I tried to, I was patient after the game, and it was tough sometimes, to keep answering the questions. You get your butt beat and throw 3 or 4 interceptions or something like that. I tried to be nice, and they would compliment me about being nice, but they told me, they said, we always knew when you kind of gave that hint about it was time. They said, what was that? They said you would turn around and pour a little shampoo in your hair. It was like, all right,
I'm done.
Let's get in that shower. Get out of here and leave me alone.
It's time to go. So you go way back, and then I remember I saw you at a press conference after one of the victories in the 10-game win streak. Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden you kind of beeline to me after, and you said, hey, man, I just watched that show you had with Tim Brando on. I didn't know you two were good friends.
Yeah, Tim.
So what's your relationship?
Yeah, Tim I've known forever, just through, him being, the announcer and radio and TV or whatever. But great guy. Known him a long time.
At you guys, how you, as I said, Tim was radio in Baton Rouge. You come through the ranks. So Tim and I, we're doing preseason Saints football, and we're doing a Packers game.
Yeah.
Even preseason.
I was with you.
You were with us. Oh,
yeah.
That was
Lambeau
great.
Field.
It was great. Lambeau Field was just wonderful. Anyway, we stayed. You might have to help me.
The Paper Valley Inn.
We stayed
in
30 miles
Appleton,
away.
Appleton, Wisconsin.
And you drive. We drive into the game, and we pass this little school there. It's where the Packers trained at one time. I can't remember the name of it. And Brando goes, I did a semifinal girls college basketball game.
I know.
Right there.
Right.
I go,
he's done it all. He's done it all. There's
working your way up through the ranks. By the way, you have no reason to remember this, but I have every reason to remember because I'm having dinner with Archie Manning at Lombardi Steakhouse in that hotel that I just mentioned, and it was you, Jim Henderson, and me and Tim. And I've worked with Tim for years. I was no awe of him anymore. But I'm like, I'm here with Jim Henderson and Archie Manning. They're calling the game. I can't believe it. Some great memories there. Hey, by the way, I have to bring up your passing academy because I didn't get to it in the segment. I think it's one of the greatest things ever. You've been doing it with your sons. It's a good chance for y'all to keep bonding. Obviously, Cooper is a big part of this. Peyton and Eli, and you bring in guys, man, and they end up being superstars.
Well, it's fun, Scott. We started the camp. We got our 23rd year coming up, and it's a little bit of a misconception from some people. It's not a prospect thing. It's not a recruiting thing. It's not a 4-star, 5-star. We have quarterbacks and wide receivers, high school players, and we want to enhance that experience for them. We think high school football is a great institution, and we know football's kind of been under attack, and I get that. I understand it. We're all working to make it a safer game, but we just want the quarterbacks, and we have more quarterbacks than anything else. We want to help them with their leadership skills. We want to help them with their fundamentals, but we want them to enjoy the journey of high school football. And we got a great coaching staff of high school and small college coaches. And then we bring in 40 starting college quarterbacks every year. They're a huge part of our camp. And they coach these kids, but yet Peyton and Eli have workouts with them. So it's just a lot of fun. I'm selfish. It guarantees me 4 days with my boys.
That's it. How great is that?
So we have a lot of fun.
I would go.
Yeah, we need to get you up there.
I don't have the arms. No, I mean, really, if you think about it, I mean, there's not a better learning situation that you could possibly be in.
Ever.
You know, you got a Hall of Fame quarterback and two sons that have been
3 SEC players of the year. I mean,
which is
phenomenal.
And you know, the fact that both those guys have won 2 Super Bowls, I think you got to be unbelievably proud, Archie.
Yeah, I mean, we only have a minute yet, but I do want to ask you that. I mean, because I want to focus on you, but yeah, your kids mean so much to you. Anybody that watches the Book of Manning means that's your #1 job in life, more than anything. And it touched my heart. I got chills thinking about it. But your kids won 4 Super Bowls, and they were MVPs in 3 of them. This is just unheard of stuff.
Yeah, Libby and I sit around. We pinch ourselves about that. You know, that we didn't try to raise quarterbacks. We just try to raise kids. But they had really good coaching along the way. They worked hard at their craft. They tried to get better, be good. But they got to play in good programs and good teams, and so we feel very blessed. And
we shouldn't leave out Cooper because I see him all the time. My son is
fantastic.
My son is a junior at Newman, and obviously, you know, Cooper's
and his son Archibald, is that his son?
Arch.
Arch is going to be a stud. This little kid, there's Cooper right there with Odell. But look at this little guy. This is his first time on Fame, so he's going to be seen all around the South. This is the next Manning that's going to be a star. I've got to go though. I can't thank you enough.
Great.
But you're going to sign this ball so you can catch a football. All right. So you're on there. You work in the Saints organization.
This
you got
thing
the
is
same
all.
I'm ball.
Yeah.
There it is. Make sure it's in the front.
It bounces funny too. Believe me.
All right, Alvin Gentry, Archie Manning, it's been my pleasure. I got to thank everybody at CST and WLE, particularly my producer, Will Hill. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. We've got Zach Streif, newly retired Zach Streif, come on, and maybe even Coach O from LSU, right here on Primetime Sports.